In this episode of the Orange Nerd Show, we are joined by Matthew Muir all the way from the UK and Mr. Webba all the way from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the bunker. We are talking all about Kathleen Kennedy today. It's an all Kathleen Kennedy Orange Nerd Show. We're talking about what is going on over there at Lucasfilm. You know, is she going to retire soon? Is she not? You know, I mean, according to YouTube, she's been fired like 17 times, but she's still there. I don't know. I don't get it. But we're going to talk about it up next on the Orange Nerd Show. Let's. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show. In the Orange Nerd Show, we talk about nerd culture, movies, film, streaming, corporate culture. We even dip into like some music video stuff, you know? We had a little
everything except the parks.
Everything, exactly, Matthew. Thank you. Everything except the parks, everything. But let's dive right in. This is actually, Matthew, this is actually your topic. You brought this to my attention on Instagram. And I love this topic because this is something that I feel, even though this is something that fans have been discussing for a long time, it's just as relevant today as it ever has been. Kathleen Kennedy is technically still the head of Lucasfilm. Now, I have some interesting observations in regards to my time over at D23 with the Italiano that I want to bring up in this video as well. But in your opinion, Matthew, what is going on here? I mean, she's had a couple high-profile flops with Indy 5, which I thought was a great movie, but a lot of people didn't want to see it. But Indy 5 and Solo, you know, a couple of underperforming streaming shows like Acolyte. In your opinion, Matthew, why is she still there? Why hasn't Disney replaced her with somebody else?
This is going to sound like quite a controversial opinion, but I honestly think there may be no real good replacement out there aside from Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau. That's one possible reason why, but also partly because any new candidate just feels too daunted by it, because they know, oh, what a terrible job she's done, and they possibly even know that even Lucas himself wasn't a saint by putting her in that hot seat back in 2012.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Matthew, because a lot of fans will tell you, I want to go back to Lucas. I want to go back to George Lucas running the show. Well, George Lucas was the guy who put Kathleen Kennedy, who you hate, in that position. So do you think if George Lucas came back in any capacity to Lucasfilm, that's going to solve your Kathleen Kennedy problem? Absolutely not. Kathleen Kennedy was not a Bob Iger choice. This was a George Lucas choice. Another thing too, Matthew, that I'm glad you brought up, George Lucas created this amazing universe. George Lucas is one of the most brilliant visionaries of our time. And I mean that. He's a fantastic visionary. Not the greatest director, but he's a fantastic visionary, you know?
He himself has acknowledged that he isn't the greatest director.
Right, he has, absolutely. And I respect that a whole lot. But even him, who created this amazing universe, got a ton of crap from the fans during the prequels, the Clone Wars movie. I mean, even the special editions and what have you. There was a lot of controversy even with the guy who created it. This was his baby, and fans were upset with him. So who's to think that Disney or really any company could come in there and make fans happy? If George Lucas couldn't do it, I mean, it's going to be tough for anybody, in my opinion. But what do you think, Mr. Webba, in terms of Kathleen Kennedy? I think we all agree that she's not the greatest, but what do we do? Or why isn't she gone yet?
Well, and I want to go back to your point about George Lucas, right? Is that I think everybody forgets that he did the prequels.
Yeah.
Which, right. You know, which everybody, I think on the most kind of general common ground, everybody hates the prequels and talks mad trash about them, except like people are like, oh, the prequels suck. Yeah, and even now, like people are like, "Oh, the prequels suck," except for Episode 3. That was the best one, right? But it's
there
like
was even a song written about the prequels called "George Lucas Ruined Our Childhood," and ruined is just a mild word. I'm having to moderate it for the sake of this video.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, you know. Yeah, people were not happy with the prequels. You're right. People did think it ruined Star Wars. It really wasn't until the Clone Wars show came around that people started to come around to this era of Star Wars. But go ahead, Mr. Webba.
No, I think what it is I think there is a lot of problems. Well, first, besides Star Wars, right? Back to Kathleen Kennedy. I think that, you know, she is a great, amazing producer for Hollywood, right? I mean, she's worked on a lot of amazing movies. But is she necessarily the best person to run Lucasfilm? And I do not agree with that, especially with a lot of the stuff we gotten out of Lucasfilm, a lot of the decisions that have been made. There have been some good stuff that have come out, but a lot of it has been more so hit and miss, right? Like I believe there's been more misses with Lucasfilm than there has been hits. Also, there's been a problem of big over budgeting on things. The other issue is a lot of this announcement and announcing of stuff without any concrete things to happen, right? Taika Waititi, Kevin Feige, the Rogue Squadron movie, right? All this.
The Game of Thrones guys, Benioff and Weiss, they were supposed to do a whole series, and that got canned. And I mean, Lord and Miller. I mean, like the list goes on and on and on. And that's why it's really hard. And this is what Josh D'Amaro hit the trap that he was kind of falling into until the D23 Expo. He sort of saved himself with that. But there's this trust with Lucasfilm and the fans that has been completely broken. I'm a huge Star Wars guy. Okay, but I've fallen off a little bit with Star Wars, but I don't even care about the announcements anymore. They can announce a new trilogy, and I'm gonna, why? Because you know what? In a year from now, it'll be canceled.
Well, and I think this is where Disney as a whole, right? Whether it's Marvel, Disney Studios, Lucasfilm, I think this is where they're learning, and I think this is why Daddy Josh did what he did at D23, which was great. And also going back to Comic-Con for this year, there wasn't a lot of huge announcements at Comic-Con for Marvel because, a lot of stuff we already knew about. And I think what Disney has finally is learning their lesson on, hopefully with Lucasfilm as well, is to only announce things that you have that are greenlit and budgeted for and that you're in production of doing.
Right, exactly. No, you got to deliver. And that's the thing. I don't know if Kathleen Kennedy can ever go back. Like, I don't know if fans will ever trust announcements or any of this stuff while she's still there. I think it's so far gone at this point. I think Star Wars is kind of in this weird kind of purgatory right now, where it's like we're kind of just waiting right now. And like, we're not going to get too excited about anything until she's gone and we get someone else in, And, the interesting thing, though, at D23, George and I went to, and Lucas, George, that's funny, George Lucas, George, Lucas, Kim, and myself, we went to a lot of these panels and what have you. And anytime Star Wars or Lucasfilm was represented on stage,
Kennedy was nowhere to be seen.
Nowhere to be seen, Matthew. The only time Kennedy came on stage was to walk out to present a Disney Legend Award, and she came on stage with Harrison Ford. That was it. When Josh D'Amaro announced all that Star Wars stuff, like the Millennium Falcon getting the Mando missions, when he announced the Fortnite stuff, every panel we had that had Star Wars in it, the film panel, you name it, it was Filoni that was up there on that stage, which is very interesting that she's not there, but he is. Do you think they're kind of prepping him?
I mean, potentially.
You think so, Matthew? You think this is the guy, and that's why he's sort of becoming the face of the franchise right now, like at the Expo?
Yeah, I think behind closed doors, in the best case scenario, they are secretly preparing a succession plan, almost like a graceful escape plan, though, for Kennedy.
Yeah, it's interesting. You think it's a possibility, Webba?
Yes, I agree with Matthew that. Because why wouldn't she be out on stage for, right? Like, if you're the one in charge of Lucasfilm, all these announcements should be coming from you, and and some of your other executives too. Yes, but you should be the primary one up there, like Kevin Feige is, right? Kevin Feige is up there, bringing out the directors, the actors, actresses, right, announcing the movies. But where's Kathleen Kennedy in all this?
Exactly.
And so I do agree with Matthew that I do think that in behind the scenes they are trying to transition and prep the new kind of takeover leadership of Lucasfilm. But here's the interesting thing though, is that I think because with Kathleen Kennedy, it's been for the most part a disaster with Lucasfilm. Not just Star Wars, but I mean, like, look at what was it? That season 1 of Willow or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, season 1 of Willow. While I did, yeah, and while I did like the new Indiana Jones movie, it was way over budgeted, and the reception was lukewarm at best, right? So a lot of the stuff she's been doing hasn't been hitting with the fans. It hasn't been really. Yes, the sequel trilogy made a lot of money, of course, because it's Star Wars. It's going to make a lot of money. But the controversy that has surrounded all these properties is just insane. And does she really have the kind of persona to really interact on that creative level with the fan base as well? I don't really think so.
And that's a part of it. That's a huge part of it. We saw this with Bob Chapek. Bob Chapek is not a moron by any means. Bob Chapek is a very brilliant businessman. Very brilliant.
He's just the wrong pick for CEO.
Right. He's the wrong pick for CEO. He's the wrong pick for especially Disney CEO, because Disney requires a certain kind of executive. You need a little bit of that customer facing sort of persona. You got to have a little bit of that charisma, a little bit of that personality. Same goes for Star Wars. Kevin Feige has it. Kevin Feige definitely has it. Kevin Feige, he gets on that stage, he knows how to hype his fan base up like crazy. You know what I'm saying? Kevin Feige, dude, that guy was everywhere at the expo. Dude, he was at the Richard Sherman tribute. He was on stage for the Richard Sherman tribute. Okay, this guy was on all kinds of panels. He was a face of Marvel everywhere you turn. Kennedy was nowhere to be found. So yeah, it's fascinating. But yeah, she doesn't have she doesn't have the personality. Very stiff, feels like a very much an empty suit in a lot of ways. And again, she's a fantastic producer. I don't want to diminish what she's accomplished.
No,
but just because you're a great basketball player doesn't mean that you're going to be a great coach necessarily, She's
not the executive kind. She just, through no fault of her own, she just isn't cut out for it.
Yeah, no, you're right, Matthew. You're absolutely correct. She's not cut out for it. And I just think it's her time to sort of step down, And this is the thing I wanted to bring up to you guys. Jennifer Lee, who actually, to be honest with you, when at the expo again, we sat through a smaller panel called Directing Animation. And she was on this panel with Pete Docter and, the new guy, Jared Bush. Right, a whole panel of various directors in the animation space at Disney. I was very impressed with Jennifer Lee, the way she handled herself. Her kind of when they picked her brain and asked her questions, she seemed to get it creatively. She didn't come off like Kathleen Kennedy, where she was like this kind of like soulless corporate exec. Like you could tell, Jennifer Lee is a very passionate animation fan, and she understands creativity. With the answers she gave, I was extremely impressed. I've said this in many videos we did recently about D23. But with her, right, she had two major flops. She had Wish, which didn't do well at all, and she had Strange World. So what happened recently? She got demoted, right? They didn't fire her, but she got demoted. So now she's going to just focus on the Frozen sequels. Jared Bush is going to come in and do and lead the studio now, right?
I think they decided that she too just isn't really cut out to be the executive. She's a great executive producer like Kennedy, but making her a head of Walt Disney Animation Studios is probably just a step too far.
100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. But that brings me to my next question. We see that Disney's willing to have the accountability train roll up to any executive. We saw it happen with Victoria Alonso, with Marvel. We saw the accountability train recently roll up to Jennifer Lee, right? She didn't get fired, but she did get demoted, right?
From the studio's flagship, from the company's flagship studio. Right.
So, and even recently too, the Disney live action studio guy, I forgot his name, and I forgot his replacement. But they had a swap out there recently, like a few months ago. So, okay,
Lucasfilm's an exception.
Right, exactly, Matthew. So why though? Why after the huge flop of Indy 5? Why after the bloated budget? Why after Solo? Why after Acolyte not really performing like it should have? Why does Disney have such a hesitation to say, you know what? You're a brilliant woman, you're a brilliant producer, Kathleen, but we have to move on from you. I don't understand why. A lot of people will tell you, right? The anti-woke people will tell you, well, they're scared to fire her because they're scared to let her go because she's a woman. They just demoted Jennifer Lee and they gave the job to a white guy. Okay, so clearly it's not that. What is it, Webba? Why can't they just do this and say, look, it's your time. You're older. You've had you had a good run. Why can't they do it with Kennedy? They did it with Jennifer Lee. I don't understand. They did it with Victoria Alonso.
Well, the first question is, did she really have a good run?
Fair. Touche. Touche.
But to your question, OG, like, I honestly don't know. It doesn't make any sense. The only thing I could think of, and we're going to now, like, conspiracy theory, like, fan idea here, is, there's maybe some secret dirt that she has on somebody in the company. And, that's a way of like, hey, you cut me loose. I'm going to tell all the dirty crap that whatever is going on and blow this whole thing open. Because here's the thing.
Compel Disney to keep her.
Right. Well, because here's the thing is like that. Why would you, as a company, knowingly, like, okay, yes, again, like I said, your trilogy has made money, right? Your Star Wars movies are always going to make money, but her budgets are also really high. And then she gets a lot of criticism, like a lot of criticism. And she's not really well liked by the fans. And it's like, and then especially like Acolyte, like, for me, it was okay. Ahsoka was better than Acolyte. Mandalorian season 1 and 2 were great. Season 3 was okay. Book of Boba Fett, I don't know what the hell that was. That should have been better than what it was. Endor was good, really good. So again, a lot of more misses than hits. And how come we haven't had a theatrical release in a while? Star Wars, like Marvel, it should be cinematic movie experiences. Yes, we can have shows and stuff, but the main story, I think, should be like in a cinematic movie type of film world, right? So with her still being here, making all these wrong choices, I'm like, there has to be something that she has on somebody, because there's no way that a studio is going to let somebody who constantly has a bad reputation amongst the fans currently that she's running a new studio, along with overspending money on stuff, and then also the show's not doing well. So why are you gonna let someone pretty much tank that side of your business? You're gonna have to let them go unless she has something on someone. That's the only thing I could think of, unless someone else in the comments can't think of something else.
For all we know, it might be dirt on Dave Filoni.
Yeah, you never know. Matthew. That's a possibility too, and it's also a possibility. Remember, this is George Lucas's pick. So there could be a Lucas element to this as well, where maybe,
potentially,
right, where there's some sort of like, when I sell this to you, it's up to her when she leaves or something, and that's part of the.
Do you think maybe there's like a contract for how many X amount of years where she's allowed to be president of Lucasfilm for?
Yeah, maybe it's something like that, where it's like when he sold Lucasfilm to Disney, maybe Lucas was like. She needs to be in there for X amount of years, or there's some sort of thing in there. Yeah, clause where it's like, it's either up to her completely and you can't do nothing about it, or there's something going on. Maybe it's a Lucas thing because that was his pick and this is his baby. So maybe that's who he really, really wants. And he didn't want like Iger to come in there after like a year and put someone else in there. It could be that. And again, like, we're totally like spitballing here. We're speculating like crazy.
Well,
but also what
that's
you said,
the outcome I'm honestly leaning most toward. It could well be a Lucas thing. And the fact that he appointed her in the first place is quite telling, to say the least.
Yeah. No, it is.
Well, I also like to point out too, guys, is check this out, right? Both, in my opinion, Bob Iger and George Lucas are very creative, forward-thinking people in storytelling, technology, all that good stuff, right? And that's why Lucasfilm Star Wars fits so much into with the Disney brand, because it's that good storytelling, great characters, pushing the envelope forward in storytelling and technology, right? And what's funny and ironic is that both of these people chose someone to lead a studio that person was not fit for it. Bob Iger chose Bob Chapek. George Lucas chose Kathleen Kennedy. Yep. Two of these brilliant minds, and then had really a bad decision on who to call for next to run the studio.
Well, and that's a great point, Webba. And that comes to the kind of full circle with what we talked about earlier, where sometimes you can be really, really good at something. Like Bob Iger is great with like look, Bob Iger, for all the shit he gets with a lot of people, he had done I think, in my opinion, with some look, the Chapek thing was a massive mistake. Massive.
Oh yeah.
But the lead up to that, all his entire tenure up to that point with Chapek was, I think everyone agreed. I mean, he was like one of the greatest entertainment CEOs of all time. The way he was able to bring in these other companies and kind of like cultivate that creativity, and it was just enough corporate influence where he stepped back, and let them do their thing, right? Like Marvel, Pixar, all these studios, Disney Animation, were running on all cylinders, and they were producing hit after hit after hit after hit. Then he shit the bed totally, like Amber Heard, right? Like, and with Chapek, and that was the whole thing. But that goes to show you that, just like with George Lucas, you can be a brilliant mind, or even Kathleen Kennedy, you can be a brilliant producer, you can be a brilliant director, you can be a brilliant visionary, but there might be that one thing that you just you can't do it. And Bob Iger, I think his big weakness, his trouble spot is picking people, picking people in these positions. He lucked out because he inherited a lot of the stuff. Like he inherited John Lasseter when he got Pixar. He inherited Feige when he got Marvel. But when he picks somebody in there, like if you look at the history of the Disney studios, the live action studio, look at all the people that ran it. It's been like a revolving door, under Bob Iger. He's had a real difficult time with that. So I don't know. We'll see.
That Kathleen Kennedy is, I think she's still there because they're trying to slowly work out the bits and pieces of Lucasfilm, trying to fix different parts of it, right? Because here's the thing: when George Lucas first sold, Lucasfilm and all that to Disney, right? There was all this talk about having like a story, like a storyboard or storybook of people, right, who will get together.
The story group, right? With
story group.
Pablo Hidalgo and all them.
Yeah, so like it was all this stuff that they were going to be structured. Every type of media, it was all going to be connected and so on and so forth, right? So I was like, cool, that's great. But then the decision making from Kathleen has been just off the charts crazy. Like, I don't know what direction is going in. I'm sure Bob Iger, even Bob Chapek, was probably like, what are we doing? Because Bob Chapek, being a good business person, he's like, he's probably like, you're losing all this money. But at the same time, he's still head of Disney, right? He still has to oversee that section. So I'm thinking that, like a Marvel, right? Walt Disney Animation, Pixar, those are still really well off to where you can make those adjustments, I think. But I think with Lucasfilm is in such shambles, they need to be careful how they restructure the studio itself.
No, they do. Yeah, they
I think Iger this time has realised the error of his ways. Because in just not letting Kennedy go soon enough, and also appointing Chapek at arguably the worst possible time. Because if he hadn't realised the error of his ways, then why would he get those board members from JP Morgan to assist with the succession plan?
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. No, I'm glad I'm glad he's got this committee to help him, and the JP Morgan guy, whoever he is, I'm glad he's got people around him that are evaluating candidates and what have you for the CEO spot. I think Iger needs that based on, and I know the board approved Chapek. I know that wasn't like completely all on Bob. To be fair, it wasn't all on Iger, but considering how bad they botched it the last time, yeah, I'm glad we got more eyeballs on it this time for sure.
They can't afford another Chapek era.
Right.
Well, Matthew, remember, Bob Iger said that there's going to have to be more accountability, and that's what's going on right now. I think eventually they will get to Lucasfilm. I think it's just taking longer than expected because I think they have to be careful on how they strategize on reorganizing Lucasfilm. Because remember, we just saw too that Dave Filoni is now the chief creative officer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
CEO, like second in command and beneath Kathleen Kennedy.
Right.
So I think that was one part of it, and Jon Favreau also being heavily involved. I think we're really going to see something maybe in the next few years where she finally departs. Probably. I don't know for sure, but Lucasfilm is, I think, the one studio where it really needs a lot of help, and they're trying to look at how can we fully fix this, right?
Yeah, no, it does.
Right.
It does, because it needs what it needs. I think more than anything right now is direction.
Yes.
There's no direction. It just seems like it's all over the place. We got to get a direction. We got to get this train back on track.
Nothing can stop us now.
Got to get the train back on track.
Literally every studio at Disney, apart from Lucasfilm, has a good direction now.
Yes, Matthew, thank you. I was about to bring that up. You're absolutely correct. Pixar is crushing it right now. Absolutely crushing it with Inside Out 2. Yep. I think the biggest animated film of all time, if not one of the biggest. I haven't really been keeping track, but it's up there. It's a huge hit. We got Disney Animation coming with Moana 2, which is also going to be, in my opinion, I think Moana 2, and I've seen it with her little sister, who's absolutely adorable. This movie's going to make $1 billion, absolutely. But we got a new head of Disney Animation with Jared Bush. Marvel is I trust Feige. He's got Chapek and all that BS out of the way. Now he can really focus and do his thing. He'll be fine. I'm not worried about him at all. It's just Lucasfilm. It's only Lucasfilm. Now let's see how this Mando and Grogu thing is. Now the thing with the Mando and Grogu film is I feel like this is more of a Filoni Favreau thing.
Right.
So even if it's really good, I don't know if that speaks to Kennedy still, though. I feel like this is their baby. I don't know.
It is, but so here's the thing, right? Is that when there's something that is bad, we like to blame the head of the studio, right? I mean, I know I do that, all right? I'm guilty of that. But at the same time, if something is good, I also have to praise the head of the studio.
That's fair.
Absolutely.
That's fair.
Because technically that was under their watch and it was their involvement somehow, right? So it with Mando and Grogu coming out, I want it to be good, right? And with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, yes, it is going to be their baby, but ultimately it's Kathleen Kennedy's call on how that movie turns out, really, right? Like what's the budget, what's going to be in it, all that stuff, right? But I think this is where really you will see the difference probably with like her and Kevin Feige or something, right? Because I think Kevin Feige, he has involvement in it, but I think he really understands Marvel. Does Kathleen Kennedy really understand Star Wars? That's the question.
That's the other thing too. Yeah, she's not. The thing with Feige is that you can sit with Feige and you can talk about comics and Marvel and like the MCU and timelines and all this stuff, right? Multiverses. And Feige will sit there and just like a fan, right? Like he, you can nerd out with the guy. If you met Kennedy at a restaurant, could you do the same with her? Could you do that?
I don't think so.
Nah, yeah, I agree, Matt. You couldn't sit down at a table across from Kathleen Kennedy and nerd out like you can with Feige. Feige loves this stuff, man. He is a fan. But like Kennedy, she's a corporate suit. She's a businesswoman, I don't know. It's a different vibe. And that's why I would personally, I've been saying it for a long time, I would keep Filoni where he's at, but I would have Favreau actually run the studio, because the thing with Filoni is that he's purely a creative, right? Mm-hmm. So keep him there as a chief creative officer. I think that's perfect for him. Favreau, I think he's got a little bit more of the Hollywood connections, a little bit more of the Hollywood chops, where I think he'd be better at running the studio. He's got the creative element too, for sure, but right. I think he'd be a better head of the studio, in my opinion.
Well, and I'm glad you bring that up, though, because here's the thing. I'm a fan of both of them. I think they're both great, right? But what I like that you bring up, OG, is that how we always talk about and who should be like the head of the of the company of Disney, right? And I'm in favor of a dual CEO, or like a CEO/president of the Disney company. Well, if you had that with Lucasfilm, you had the president, then you had the chief creative officer, because anytime you see Comic-Con or like the Star Wars days, who's always there together in a pair?
Right.
Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni.
Yes. So, yeah, you're right. And because I think he was, you're right. Because even at D23, Favreau was with him a lot.
Yes.
I think he was. I'm pretty sure he was. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken.
So I think probably a good way to run Lucasfilm would be to have something like a similar operation. Favreau be the president and Filoni be the chief creative officer, but they work as a pair, though.
Yes. Hey, I'm down for that, dude. I am so down for that. That would be perfect. Absolutely perfect. These guys have proven themselves. They were one of, I think, not even one of the biggest hit in the Disney Star Wars era in terms of like relevance and everything, lastability, was Mandalorian. Man, that franchise, that was the biggest hit Disney ever had. Now, I don't mean financially necessarily, because I look, you want to dive into the numbers. The sequel trilogy made like $1 bajillion in the box office, even though it was,
from a fan standpoint,
right? From a fan standpoint, from quality of the content, from cultural relevance, which is another big thing. Mando and Grogu was way more culturally relevant. Grogu was like a movement. You know what I'm saying? Grogu was like Lucasfilm's, Frozen, basically. I mean, it changed the game. Nothing really came out of the sequel trilogy that matched that phenomenon that Grogu and Mando was,
No. And here's why. I think part of the reason is because, well, first of all, the sequel trilogy, while I did really enjoy episode 7, right? I really like that. But 8 and 9, while they did make a lot of money, creatively and storytelling wise, it was just a big WTF for a lot of the fans. And also, the characters weren't just like great right now. If you have really great characters, you bring it up all the time. Big merchandise sellers. Mandalorian is a huge merchandise seller, dude.
Yeah, no, it is. That you have with Filoni and Favreau, they crafted the franchise that, in my opinion, was the most successful thing that Lucasfilm has done on the Disney era, and yet they still don't run that studio. It makes no sense to me, and I get it. In fact, like Filoni isn't like low man on the totem pole by any means. I mean, this guy he's up there. You know what I'm saying? And Favreau as well, but. Man, I just can't believe after all the disappointments that we saw in her watch, these guys don't run it now based on what they've done. It's crazy to me, but we'll see. I don't think, I know YouTube has been nuts with the Kathleen Kennedy stuff. Like I said, I joked earlier in the show, she's been fired like from her job like 15 times, according to YouTube.
If you watch Doomcock, she just fabricates all of these rumors.
Oh yeah, exactly, dude. All the anti-woke people that like get all upset over like a gay M&M on a commercial or something, those people.
Doomcock is the worst of them.
Now, Matthew, Matthew, I want to ask you, are you a gamer? Like, do you game a lot at all, or no?
I do game quite a bit, but don't worry, I don't go anywhere near geeks and gamers.
You're a geek, but you're not a geeks and gamers,
yeah,
right?
No.
Okay. So I want to bring this up because here's another aspect we haven't talked about, guys, and that's the gaming side, right? Disney, back in the day, with like Capcom and stuff like that, Disney did like partner with them and do kind of the Disney games and whatever a little bit, but. For a long time, the one piece of media that Disney has never really dived into is the gaming side of stuff, right? Like, we've had books, CDs, cassettes, the parks, the movies, shows, all that stuff, right? But the one thing that was always lacking was really video games. Now, they are starting to dive into the video game aspect, right? Like with Fortnite and all that stuff or whatever.
Right, and Outlaws and all that.
Yes. So, but the other thing is, like, when you look at Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy, I'm not sure what or like how big of a play she is in terms of the gaming stuff, right? Like, for example, Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, right? Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2 are one of the most beloved Star Wars games, along with Knights of the Old Republic for Star Wars / gaming fans. And the developers DICE, who create the Battlefield series, which is like a military shooter game, people were excited that they were doing a Battlefront, like a newer version of Battlefront, because pretty much Battlefront was just Battlefield but just Star Wars skin. But it was still amazing because you got to battle on Hoth, battle on Yavin, battle on Kashyyyk, all that stuff, right? It was cool, but it was. Compared to what we had before in terms of there
wasn't a decent storyline.
No, there was no decent story. There was no decent storyline, except 2 had a storyline, but it was okay. There was a lot of content missing that you had in the regular games, and I feel like that when Disney gave the kind of rights to EA for like, what was it, Matthew, like 10 years or something? That was insane. I was like, 10 years, and you only produced like they only made like 3 to 4 games in that time. Well, one was Squadrons, which is a first-person, TIE Fighter X-Wing game. The other 2 were Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, and then the third one, the other one, Matthew, I don't know if there was another one, but was it EA? I think it was the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and then the sequel. But EA has been really not well liked among the fans because that publisher tends to cheap out, rush the games, and blah blah blah, right? So the games have done okay, but I'm wondering like how much input as a president of the Lucasfilm does she have in that area, and was she one of the ones who made a deal with like her and Bob or whatever with EA?
I honestly fear she might have quite a big role.
You think she's got a big role, Matthew? That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, the gaming stuff is going to change dramatically, I think, now, because now Disney is very much invested into Epic Games. Was it like $9 billion or something they spent on that?
$9 billion.
Yeah, a huge number. So they have a lot of resources now they can kind of pull from in that industry. You know what I'm saying? So that's interesting. But again, yeah, I don't know, like the Kathleen Kennedy factor and how much creative control. That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, we'll see. So, we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on with Lucasfilm, like you said, Ebba, with the gaming. Obviously, the movie's got to get back on track, right? And even the streaming stuff. Like, we got to get this ship back on track. I mean, look, I'm hopeful for Mando and Grogu. I think that's very much a normie friendly franchise. You know, your grandma could go see that because she loves little baby Yoda. Like I knew coworkers that were tuning into Mandalorian every week who never watched any Star Wars in their entire life, but they would watch that show because of how cute he was. My friend Natalie, she was constantly watching that because of Grogu, a total Star Wars. She never cared about Star Wars before that show brought her in. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I think this movie will do very well. Even if it's like mid, if it's like okay, I think it'll still do very well. As long as it doesn't like totally suck, which I doubt it. It's Favreau. I kind of have a lot of faith in him. I think he's a talented guy.
Yeah, no, exactly. The only thing I'm kind of worried about is the other movies they announced. Right? It was that the Rey movie, and then I'm like, why?
Yeah. See, that's the thing, and this is the frustrating thing with that because, see, originally that was gonna be the first movie out the gate again after the 5 or 6 year hiatus, and that was a bad call. Okay, I'm glad they switched that because that would have been a bad call because that's a risky movie. You know what I'm saying? It's a very divisive character. I personally like Rey. I like Daisy Ridley. I like her character. I just think that the movies that character was in weren't the greatest, but the character itself has a lot of potential. Just like like John Boyega's Finn and Poe. These are great characters. That's the thing with the sequel trilogy. These are great characters. It's just the story that they inhabited wasn't that
was wasted on them.
Exactly, Matthew. So it's like I'm not opposed to a Rey movie because I like her. I'm just worried because it is a hot issue. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like you're gonna have all of YouTube, saying how woke it is before it's even out. All that bullshit. It's safer to do Mando and Grogu and at least get one hit under your belt before you dive into the riskier stuff. Go ahead, Webba.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem too is not the problem too, but again, when you make characters that under the hood are great, but they're written in a way that's just awful, then it can make the character come off screen as just really bad. Because, and that's the big thing too with these studios, OG, is that Marvel too, right? And some of their movies and a lot of the TV shows is the writing just hasn't been very good. Like, why are we not having really good up to standard par writing? And the writing has just been kind of all over the place. Like, doesn't make sense. Okay, like Acolyte, right? That made no sense. Like, you have the sister who's like, oh, I want to turn myself in, blah blah blah, and then like 5 minutes later in the same episode, then she goes back to wanting to be with the Sith dude. I forgot what his name was. It made no sense. Like, how is this logic that makes sense? And I feel like there's been a lot of that in these Star Wars and Marvel TV shows, and it's just like, you guys need to just get, the best of the best for these properties.
Well, no, yeah, I've been saying, yeah, I agree with you, and I've been saying that too. Where it's like I'll watch a show like Succession, or House of Dragon, right, or Game of Thrones, right, and I can't put those shows down. Like I can't put them down. I mean, I burn through I can burn through a whole season of Succession like that, dude. I won't even feel it. That show is fantastic. House of the Dragon, same thing. I mean, I love these shows, and the way I know it's a good show is this: if it's like when the episode ends, I want to immediately jump into the next one.
Yeah.
I rarely feel that way with Disney Plus shows. Rarely. You know what I'm saying? There's a few exceptions here and there, but not really. Disney has the resources to really do it and go big. Acolyte, you could have done a House of the Dragon quality show there easily. Disney has the money to do it. Honestly, Disney has more resources right now than Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is not doing that hot. Disney could definitely do a show on par with House of Dragon in terms of quality. And it didn't, and I know there's a lot of people who love the Acolyte, and that's awesome. I'm not shitting on anybody that loves it, you know what I'm saying? But I think the quality could have been a little higher. I think you could have had for what it cost. It cost. I mean, it could have been better, and it just missed the mark. And I've noticed that a lot with some of these shows. They got to get that quality up.
That, and also, do you know what else missed the mark too on the Acolyte? Was I thought the show was going to be one thing, and it turned out to be something else. So we're down with the Acolyte, right? I was expecting a story from a darker side point of view, right, of an Acolyte, right? And then when we had the poster, right, with like the lightsaber hilt and the blood on it, I was like, yo, that looks sick. All of the point of view pretty much was from the Jedi in this show.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. When you have a show called The Acolyte, okay, it's about the Sith. I want dark. I want like a Game of Thrones Sith kind of thing, right? Where they're all kind of screwing each other over to get top spot, right? All these Sith or these Darksiders are competing, and just like screw each other over. And very much Game of Thrones, where it's like they're all sort of like plotting and scheming this whole thing. And but to have a bunch of Jedi, I don't know, man. That's not what people were expecting. Exactly, Webba. I mean, and that's not what we wanted from this show. So a lot of weirdness with this, So and that's typical of Lucasfilm. They kind of do that. One of the big things that really disappointed me was some of the casting stuff, right? And I don't mean casting was disappointing because they casted bad people. Actually, quite the opposite. I think the casting for a lot of the stuff, the casting was really good and they were underutilized. For example, I don't know the gentleman's name, but it's a group of martial artists. I think they're from Thailand. Okay. And they were in that movie, The Raid. Okay. Very talented guys. I watched The Raid, and they announced in like 2014, I think it was, that those guys were going to be in The Force Awakens. I'm like, oh shit, this is going to be crazy. They got the guys from The Raid to go in there and they're going to be in a Star Wars movie. There's going to be some crazy lightsaber shit going on in this movie, right? Turns out they hire these guys to stand in a hallway in the Millennium Falcon and argue with Han Solo. That was the entire thing. That's all they did in The Force Awakens. You get the guys from The Raid, these martial artists that were in these guys are incredible, and that's how you
was wasted on them.
Oh, wasted, completely wasted. You get Gwendolyn, what's her name? Gwendolyn Christie. Gwendolyn Christie. Yeah. And you put her in a mask for 3 movies. She is a fantastic talent.
Oh, is that Phasma? Yeah, I was going to bring that up. It's like you have this hype train of Captain Phasma, right? And then all of a sudden, like, where is she? Trash compactor. Yeah, behind a mask. Trash compactor. Falls out in episode 8. Gets killed and falls out the ship. It's like that hype that it made no sense at all. Like episode 8 just literally broke everything.
It was just. Well, I thought it was a great standalone movie, but it wasn't a great like middle part of a trilogy.
See, and that's a problem. OG is like, you can. I guess you can judge it on its own merit, right? But this movie is part of a trilogy. So you kind of have to judge it as part of that trilogy, and it just doesn't make sense. And another issue I have with these Disney Plus shows, which I always say over and over again, right? All the issues I have with them is, while I do like The Mandalorian a lot, I think another issue. Okay, see, this wouldn't be so much an issue if there was more episodes. Okay, so I feel like a lot of the times there's episodes that are just kind of standalone episodes, but they don't really go anywhere. Which is why there's a lot of other shows like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or Sopranos, whatever. Right? There is some of those standalone episodes, but then there's also episodes where events happen and there's consequences to these events, and that's how it goes, right?
Yeah, you never feel like there's like you never like a show like Breaking Bad. I never felt like there were filler episodes in there. Like I felt like
Right.
every episode got us further in the story.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like in a lot of these shows, we kind of get that. We get that, and I'm like, okay, we're already episode 4 into an 8 series, and then once you get to like episode 5 or 6, you know, you feel like you just hit a midway point, and then the season's over in like 2 more episodes.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. It's crazy. We'll see. A lot of changes are happening at Disney. We're gonna have a new CEO coming in a little bit. You know,
Well,
we'll see what happens. You know.
Well, I just want to ask you guys though. But speaking of Lucasfilm and Star Wars, okay, we have a new show coming out, guys. Star Wars Skeleton Crew.
Right.
Now, Matthew, do we know, or do you know? Do you know if this was, like, do we know how far back this was announced to be like made? Like, do we know who was really under the leadership of this in terms of the creative side?
Yeah, I don't know the exact, but this was announced. Oh man, I think there was a Disney Plus. There was a Disney Plus event. I think it was December of 2021 or 2020, around that time. I'm not 100% exactly when, and I believe it was announced at that time. So if I'm not mistaken, correct me in the comments. Everyone at home, if I'm wrong, I'm guessing this was announced at that Disney Plus event. 2020, 2021. So that was before Filoni came in as a creative officer, if I'm not mistaken.
So do you think we'll still like see some of that poopy residue from Chapek's era, like into this show?
You might. Unfortunately, you might. And it's sad because I think this concept, this is the issue that I have a lot of the Star Wars stuff, is that they're great concepts, but the execution isn't like quite there, you know? Like I said, Acolyte is a dope concept, dude. You take the Acolyte and you take House of the Dragon, that model of a show, you have an amazing thing there. I like Skeleton Crew. I like the idea of having a Stranger Things or like a Goonies sort of adventure in that Star Wars universe. I think that's actually very brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah. But we got to see how the execution is. Is it gonna deliver? That's the whole thing. That's the thing. They don't have a problem with coming up with dope ideas. The ideas are there. They're dope, you know. But it's just that execution isn't right. It's not there yet.
And the other problem too they have, and the Marvel too, is they always the shows always start strong, but they don't always land strong at all. They always just kind of fizzle out like on a whimper, dude. And it's like, okay, you can start a show really strong, but then you have to end with the banger as well.
You have to. No, you have to. So we'll see. We will absolutely see. We'll keep an eye on it. Mr. Webba, thank you for joining today. Brother, if you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, Mr. Webba, at Webslinger760.
There he is. And down below, Matthew Muir, all the way from the UK. Now, Matthew, your Instagram has a lot of numbers and stuff going on. So, actually, no, your Instagram doesn't. Your Instagram is just Matthew Thomas Muir, right?
Yeah, Matthew Thomas Muir, or one word.
All one word. Okay, so he is Matthew Thomas Muir on Instagram. I'll be linking his Instagram in the description. Make sure you follow Matthew. Very, very passionate Disney fan. You definitely, especially if you're into Disney animation, you definitely want to follow Matthew on Instagram. Matthew is a smart guy. He got off of X. I actually was talking to our good friend Seymour about that today. I'm considering it, bro.
Do it. Honestly, OG, you should just log out, leave your account intact, but just never bother returning.
Yeah, no, never return. Exactly. No, I feel like it might come to that, Matthew, because I don't like a lot of these changes that Elon is doing. I think that the site has turned into an absolute. It's filth. It's all trolls and harassment and fucking raunchy videos and just. bots. It's horrible. It's not a good. It's borderline unusable at this point, and I'm like ready to walk from it. You know.
Like,
So
It's
we'll see.
basically turning into Truth Social.
What was that? I'm sorry. It's turning into what?
It's basically turning into Elon Musk's version of Truth Social.
Yeah,
Donald Trump's network.
Right. Yeah, exactly. From what I heard, that's not doing so hot, or at least the company that owns that is like, from what I saw like last week, the stock has been taking a hit. But yeah, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today, talking Kathleen Kennedy, talking Star Wars. Fantastic conversation. Comment down below, everybody, with all your thoughts on everything we talked about. Kathleen Kennedy, the future of Star Wars, the gaming, whatever you want to discuss in the comments down below. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.